So last time we looked at Genesis 25 and we saw the death of Abraham and the birth of twin sons, Esau and Jacob, to Isaac and his wife Rebekah. And we saw that Isaac and Rebekah played favorites with their children. Each one of them favored one of the sons over the other ones, or over the other one. And even worse, Isaac's favorite, Esau, wasn't the same as Rebekah's favorite, Jacob. And so we also looked at the tradition of the firstborn son receiving a double portion of the inheritance from the father, and we read about Esau selling his birthright, that firstborn's birthright, to Jacob for some red lentil stew. So now in chapter 26, we're going to look at just a continuation of that story, really. In verse 1 it says, "Now there was a famine in the land, besides the former famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Gerar, to Abimelech, king of the Philippines, king of the Philistines. And the Lord appeared to him and said, 'Do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and to your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands, and in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws.'" Now, let's look at this map really briefly, this Patriarchs in Canaan map. So Gerar, if you remember, was down here somewhere southeast of Gaza. This area right here is Gaza. And Gerar, nobody really knows where it was, but Gerar was part of the Philistine lands, and Abraham sojourned there, and now we see that Isaac was also sojourning there. Now, this name, or this word Abimelech, remember, means it's both a proper name and a title, kind of like Pharaoh, and it means my father is king. And we have really no way of knowing whether this Abimelech that we're talking about here with Isaac, that was, having, interaction with Isaac, is the same one that Abraham ran into sometime earlier. And remember that Abraham swore an oath with Abimelech at Beersheba. Remember, that's how Beersheba got its name, the well of the sevenfold oath. And that oath was formalized with the gift of 7 ewe lambs from Abraham to Abimelech. It's possible that Abimelech was the son of this Abimelech that Isaac was interacting with, was the son of the Abimelech that Abraham swore the oath with, and because, as I said, Abimelech is a title as well as a proper name. But a little bit later, we're going to see that Phicol, the commander of Abimelech's army, also ran into Isaac, or met with Isaac, and that's the same name who was the commander of the army in Abraham's time. So either we have two different men who were both named after their fathers, or this Abimelech and Phicol are the same ones that Abraham dealt with. I think that's more likely, but we really have no way of telling just from the biblical text whether that's true or not. And really, the answer to the question isn't really important. What is important is that God reiterated, as we see here, to Isaac the same promise that he made to Abraham. Remember in Genesis 12:3, God promised that through Abraham's seed, or his offspring, that all the nations all the families of the earth would be blessed. And of course, the seed that he was referring to was Jesus, the Messiah, or Mashiach, who came to take the sins of the world. Notice that God emphasized to Isaac that he had made this promise to Abraham in response to Abraham's faith. But that's not, strictly speaking, that's not really true. God doesn't respond to anything. God had determined to bring forth this blessing through the family of Abraham, or through Abraham's offspring, since before the beginning. God had determined to bring forth Jesus through the line of Abraham, starting with Adam, and then going through Noah, or through Adam's son Seth, and then through Noah, and through Noah's son Shem, to Abraham, and from Abraham to Isaac, and as we'll see, from Isaac through Jacob, and specifically through Jacob's son Judah. We'll learn about that next time. So God didn't make this promise to Abraham and then to Isaac in turn as a response to Abraham's faith. God had already determined to use Abraham and his family to bless all the families of the earth. But God spoke about Abraham's obedience, and really, he says, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge and my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Well, really, there weren't any laws per se yet that we know about. Abraham did keep the covenant of circumcision that God established with him in Genesis 17. And he also obeyed God's voice in Genesis 12 when God called on him to leave his father's house in Haran and travel to the land that God would show him. And he'd also, of course, obeyed the test of faith that God put upon him when he called Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. And Abraham had obeyed all of those things. But most importantly, Abraham had believed the promise that God would bring forth from him an heir who would come from his own body. And Abraham had believed that, and it says in Genesis 15:6 that Abraham believed God, and God credited it to him, that is his faith, as righteousness. And remember, we looked at that before, and we saw that as a model of God crediting to us Jesus' righteousness through faith, our faith in his gospel. So, continuing on in verse 6, it says, "So Isaac settled in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, 'She is my sister,' for he feared to say, 'my wife,' thinking lest the men of the place should kill me because of Rebekah, because she was attractive in appearance. When he had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out of a window and saw Isaac laughing, and that word laughing with, and that word there is sahak. We'll look at that in a minute. Rebekah, so saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah, his wife. So Abimelech called Isaac and said, "Behold, she is your wife. How could you then say, 'She is my sister'?" Isaac said to him, "Because I thought, lest I die because of her." Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, "Whoever touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death." You know, the old saying goes that the acorn doesn't fall very far from the tree. Of course, Abraham, Isaac's father, had told the same lie to Abimelech, and he'd told the same lie to Pharaoh before that. You remember Abraham. He's the one whose faith and obedience had been credited to him as righteousness, right? So, you know, Isaac lied about Rebekah just like Abraham had lied about Isaac's mother, Sarah. And you know what? This stupid, silly strategy worked just as well for Isaac as it had for Abraham. That is, not at all. And you know, this reminded me of the well-known proverb in Proverbs 22:6. It says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it." Well, conversely, you know, teach your children bad habits and teach them to lie, teach them to behave unrighteously, and they'll fall into exactly the same traps that you did. Anyway, you remember from Genesis 20, verse 12, when Abimelech chastised Abraham about this deception concerning Sarah, Isaac's mother. Abraham gave that lame, possibly true excuse that Sarah was indeed his half-sister, that is, the daughter of his father, but not the daughter of his mother. But, you know, Isaac didn't have that excuse, since Rebekah was his second cousin, not his sister. So, anyway, you know, just as an aside here, Isaac was 40 when he married Rebekah, 3 years after Sarah died. And although we're not told precisely how old Rebekah was when she left her family in Haran to marry Isaac, she was very likely in her young 20s or in her late teens. So considerably younger than Isaac, about half his age. And so no doubt she was quite beautiful by this, or still at this time. Anyway, so that word sahak that we find in Genesis 26:8, we've seen that word before. Quite a few English translations render this word as caressing. So it says in the ESV that Abimelech saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah. Some translations render that as caressing, Isaac caressing Rebekah. But this same word we've seen before in Genesis 21:9, when Isaac was being weaned by Sarah, or had been weaned by Sarah. Remember, Abraham had a celebration of the weaning, and Sarah saw Ishmael, Isaac's brother, laughing at Isaac during that little party or that little celebration. Well, that is the same word, sahak, and a lot of English translations render that occasion where we see the word sahak as mocking or scoffing. But regardless of what Abimelech saw Isaac and Rebekah doing, it was clear that he was, firmly convinced that Rebekah was indeed Isaac's wife, and Isaac didn't bother to deny it. How could he? Now, assuming that this Abimelech that was that Isaac was involved with is the same one that Abraham made the oath with. It wasn't the first time that one of this family had lied to him about, the man's wife being his sister. So he probably wasn't too surprised when he caught Isaac and Rebekah doing whatever it was that they were doing. He also doubtless recalled God's very serious threat of death if anyone were to molest Sarah in any way. And so he figured probably God would feel the same way about Rebekah. And so consequently, it's not surprising that he was so severe in his chastisement of Isaac, and so what you would say stark in his warning to his people not to touch Isaac or his wife. So continuing in verse 12, and Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. The Lord blessed him, and the man became rich and gained more and more until he became very wealthy. He had possessions of flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. Well, God blessed Isaac because of his pristine behavior and faith and righteousness and obedience, right? No, God blessed him despite his bad behavior and his lack of faith, really, his lack of trust. Nevertheless, God blessed him and made him prosperous. And we see that, or we can see that, or should see that, as a model of God's grace towards us. Paul said in Romans 5, verse 6, he said, "For while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." But, although Isaac may not have been any more deserving of God's grace than any other sinner like us, God nevertheless blessed him. And in that, we are reminded that God had determined to bring forth the Messiah, Jesus, through the line of Isaac, just as he'd promised Abraham. So in verse 15, now the Philistines had stopped and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we." So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines had stopped after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, "The water is ours." So he called the name of the well Esek, which means contention, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that also, and he called its name Sitnah, meaning strife. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it, so he called its name Rehoboth, which means wide spaces, saying, For now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. Now, remember from our studies in Genesis 20 and Genesis 21 that even after Abraham lied to the Philistines about Sarah, Abimelech nevertheless invited Abraham to stay in the land of the Philistines and dwell wherever he liked. And he gave Abraham gifts of livestock and of servants. And afterwards, when contention arose between the herdsmen of Abraham and the herdsmen of Abimelech, Abraham and Abimelech made a covenant, a peaceful coexistence covenant, and a covenant to share the water. And as a formalization of that covenant, Abraham gave Abimelech those 7 ewe lambs, and therefore the well where they made that covenant was called Beersheba, the well of the sevenfold oath. But after Abraham died, apparently Abimelech and the Philistine people didn't feel compelled to abide by that oath that they had made with Isaac's father, with Abraham's son, Isaac. I find it quite odd that the Philistines have stopped up the wells because water is very scarce in the Negev, and anytime you find a well, that's to me it would have been more advantageous to them to try to drive Isaac away from them and then use the water themselves. But maybe they just weren't strong enough to do that. It says that Abimelech had said, let's see, where does it say? And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we." So maybe they thought that they couldn't overwhelm Isaac, and so the next best thing was, if they couldn't have the water, then neither could Isaac. Or perhaps the wells themselves had become polluted some way and weren't usable anyway. So in verse 23, from there he, that is Isaac, went up to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, "I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you and will bless you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake." So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. So let's look again at this map. Let's see, it says that he built an altar here in Beersheba, right? The little red symbols with the Batman horns. Those are altars that were built by Isaac, Abraham, and Jacob. This up here at the top, this one here at Shechem, and this one here somewhere near Bethel, between Bethel and Ai, was built by Abraham. And then Abraham also built an altar at Hebron, at Mamre, at the Oaks of Mamre. And Isaac built this altar down here in Beersheba, as it says here. Now, it's intriguing to me here in this passage that we see God reiterating his promise to Isaac for the second time in the same chapter. God knew somehow, because he's God, that Isaac needed this reassurance, just as he knew that Abraham's servant needed the reassurance that he gave him. Remember Abraham's servant, when he went up to Padan Aram to find a wife for Isaac, he had prayed that very specific prayer, asking God to show him success in his mission to go find a wife for Isaac, and he made a very specific prayer. Remember about let the lady who comes down here to fill her to gather water or to draw water. When I ask her for a drink, let her give me a drink and say, yes, here, drink, and then let me water your camels also. And then God brought that about just as the servant had asked. He gave a very specific answer to a very specific prayer. God knew that Abraham's servant needed that kind of reassurance. And he knew that Isaac needed the reassurance that, he would fulfill the promises that he had made to Isaac's father, Abraham. And this reminds me of the times in my own life when God knew that I needed specific reassurances, and he gave them. He was faithful to provide exactly as much reassurance as I need to continue in his service and the service of his kingdom and his calling upon me for the uses that he's laid before me. In the upper room on the night that he was betrayed, Jesus knew that he would soon be taken away from his disciples and that they would be fearful, that they would be confused, that they would be lost. It says that, Jesus actually quoted a prophecy that said, strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. Jesus knew that they would need reassurance for the time that he was in the grave until he rose again and appeared to them. So in John 14, starting in verse 15, he says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper to be with you forever, even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, for he dwells with you and will be in you. I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. Yet a little while, and the world will see me no more. But you will see me, because I live, you also will live. In that day you will know that I am in the Father, and you in me, and I in you. Whoever has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him. So continuing now in verse 26, when Abimelech went to him from Gerar with Ahuzath, his advisor, and Phicol, the commander of his army, Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, seeing that you hate me and have sent me away from you? They said, we see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we said, let there be a sworn pact between us, between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you, and have done nothing to you, have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord. So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. In the morning they rose early and exchanged oaths. Then Isaac sent them on their way, and they departed from him in peace. That same day Isaac's servants came and told him about the well that they had dug, and said to him, we have found water. So he called it Sheba, which means an oath. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. This is virtually identical to the same story when Abimelech and Abraham swore the oath that they sealed or formalized with the gift of the 7 ewe lambs. It almost seems like a cut and paste of that story by one of the scribes. Remember that Isaac, or God, had blessed Abraham, or blessed Isaac, even after he lied to Abimelech, and Abimelech and his advisors didn't miss the significance of the fact that God had blessed Isaac. They recognized that Isaac was a man of God despite his bad behavior, and so they wisely chose to live at peace with him. And this is reminiscent to me of Paul's admonition to the church in Rome. He said in Romans 12, verse 18, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Today we would do well to focus on living peaceably, especially with our brothers and sisters in Christ. Jesus promised that doing so would bring a blessing. He said in Matthew 5, verse 9, in the Beatitudes, he said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. So continuing in verse 34, it says, when Esau was 40 years old, he took Judith, which means praised, the daughter of Beeri, which means my well, the Hittite, to be his wife, and Basemath, which means spice, the daughter of Elon, which means mighty or terebinth, the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. Now we're going to take a closer look at Esau's family when we get to Genesis 36, but for now, we just need to remember that these Hittite wives of Esau irritated Rebekah and Isaac. Rebekah later is going to use that bitterness and that irritation to convince Isaac to send Jacob away to Padan Aram in search of a wife instead of taking a wife from among the Canaanites. So continuing on into chapter 27, when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son?" And he answered, "Here I am." He said, "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food, such as I love, and bring it to me, so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Now, remember from our study of Genesis 25 that as the firstborn son, Esau was entitled to a double portion of the inheritance from Isaac, his father. Now, inheritance in ancient Hebrew tradition was promulgated through a blessing of the children, or the sons, I should say, given by the father near the end of his life. Now, praise God, none of us actually knows when the end of our lives will be. Isaac realized that he wouldn't, or he thought he realized that he wouldn't live much longer. He was blind, you know. As it turned out, Isaac lived for another 20 years, but nevertheless, he had determined to pronounce this, end of life blessing on his sons well beforehand. Now, we also saw in Genesis 25 that Esau was Isaac's favorite of the two sons, but Jacob was Rebekah's favorite. And we talked about the evils that are brought about by when parents play favorites with their children, particularly when the mother's favorite and the father's favorite are different. Now, what Isaac didn't know at this point was that Esau had sold his birthright to Jacob for that red lentil stew. Now, that had happened some years before. We really don't know exactly how long before. But the thing is, it was a private conversation between the two boys. So even if Esau did sell his birthright, first of all, Jacob had no way to prove that, and furthermore, Isaac had the final say anyway. Regardless of what kind of deal the two boys had hatched up together, no doubt Isaac had intended to give the double portion blessing to Esau, his favorite, rather than Jacob. Esau was also the firstborn. So, continuing in verse 5, it says, "Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, 'I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food, that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats, so that I may prepare from them delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And you shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies.'" Now, remember that Rebekah's name means ensnarer. Rebekah means ensnarer. She had no intention of allowing her husband to pronounce this double portion blessing on Esau. She wanted that blessing for her favorite son, Jacob. So she set a trap for Isaac to fool him into giving the blessing to Jacob instead of Esau, even though Jacob had been born after Esau. So continuing in verse 11, "But Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me and I shall seem to be mocking him and bring a curse upon myself, and not a blessing. His mother said to him, Let your curse be on me, my son, only obey my voice, and go, bring them to me. So he went and took them and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared delicious food such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her older son, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. And the skins of the young goats she put on his hands, and on the smooth part of his neck, and she put the delicious food and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. Now, Jacob's name, Jacob, means heel holder or supplanter. He wasn't above conspiring with his mother to deceive his father Isaac. Far from it. Jacob had very few qualms about doing whatever it took to get ahead and to get an advantage over someone. His only concern was that he might be caught, and that Isaac would curse him and cut him out of the will entirely, rather than blessing him. So continuing in verse 18, so he went in to his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am. Who are you, my son? Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. But Isaac said to his son, How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? He answered, Because the Lord your God, granted me success. Then Isaac said to Jacob, Please come near that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not. So Jacob went near to Isaac his father, who felt him and said, The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he did not recognize him, because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. He said, Are you really my son Esau? He answered, I am. Then he said, Bring it near to me, that I may eat of my son's game and bless you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. So once Jacob was committed to the plot, he was in it all the way. He was certainly bold in his deceit. He lied twice to direct questions, and whether he truly was Esau. And even worse, Jacob blasphemed the name of the Lord, saying that God had given him, success in the hunt when, he hadn't been hunting at all. Now, of course, Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Esau couldn't know what we do with the benefit of hindsight, that all of them were acting in accordance with the will of God to accomplish his purpose, to bring forth Jesus, the Mashiach, for the salvation of all mankind through the line of Jacob, not the line of Esau. As we'll see next time, God confirmed this to Jacob in a dream as he was fleeing from the wrath of Esau, who had threatened to kill him as soon as Isaac died. It's tragic that so many of Esau's, of Jacob's descendants, failed to recognize the Mashiach when he finally came, despite all of the prophecies that they had pertaining to him and foretelling his coming through the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So in verse 26 it says, Then his father Isaac said to him, Come near and kiss me, my son. So he came near and kissed him. And Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. So, once again, with the benefit of hindsight, we can recall the fulfillment of Isaac's prophetic blessing here. Peoples and nations did indeed bow down to Jacob's descendants in the time of King David and the time of King Solomon, before the nation fell into idolatry, and God raised up Babylon to chastise them. More importantly, billions of people have bowed down before Jesus the Mashiach, who came forth from the line of Jacob. Now, Isaac's wording here is intriguing of this blessing. Thinking that he was blessing Esau and not Jacob, Isaac spoke of his son Esau being lord over his brothers, right? And he also said that his son's mother's sons, that is Esau's mother's sons, would bow down to him, thinking it was Esau once again. But the only sons that we know of that Isaac and Rebekah had were Esau and Jacob. But from the wording of this blessing, it seems that they may have had other sons that we don't know about from the text of the word itself. Anyway, that's conjecture, of course. But the wording of the blessing seems odd, that he says, be Lord over your brothers, not brother, but your brothers, and may your mother's sons, not your mother's son, bow down to you. So continuing in verse 30, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, Esau, his brother, came in from his hunting. He also prepared delicious food and brought it to his father, and he said to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me. His father Isaac said to him, who are you? He answered, I am your son, your firstborn, Esau. Then Isaac trembled very violently and said, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? And I ate it all before you came, and I have blessed him. Yes, and he shall be blessed. So it's clear from this that Jacob and Rebekah had completely pulled the wool over Isaac's eyes. They completely fooled him with this impersonation. So why then didn't Isaac, when he found out, call Jacob back in and curse him and disinherit him and bless Esau? It's hard to say, but perhaps, in accordance with the tradition, once the blessing was given, the blessing was given. And Isaac really didn't have the option to take it back. We don't know that. That's just speculation, but it seems odd that he wouldn't have, corrected his error once he found out what it was, unless that was the case, unless he really didn't have any choice. And, we see here that Isaac did indeed persist in his blessing. And, if we consider it carefully, once again, we have to remember that God had determined since before the beginning that Isaac would bless Jacob, blessing the younger brother and bringing the double portion of the inheritance to him, or giving it to him, because God had determined to bring forth Jesus the Mashiach through Jacob, not Esau. All of the players in this little farce were unknowingly acting exactly within the will of God that he had preordained for his own purposes. So in verse 34, as soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, bless me, even me also, my father. But he said, your brother came deceitfully and has taken away your blessing. Esau said, is he not rightly named Jacob, or that is usurper? For he has cheated me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he's taken away my blessing. Then he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Now, we can certainly feel for Esau. It's easy to see why he was upset at this deceit of Jacob and how completely well it had worked. But in all fairness to Jacob, Esau sold his birthright. He gave it up willingly. Jacob didn't cheat him out of it. He just took advantage of a moment of weakness. So in a sense, Esau only has himself to blame, or had himself to blame for this deal that he made with Jacob over the birthright. But he was rightfully bitter over the deceit that Jacob used to take away his blessing. With all that said, though, we still need to remember this is all in accordance with God's preordained plans since eternity past. So, picking up again, remember he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Then in verse 37, Isaac answered and said to Esau, behold, I have made him lord over you, and all his brothers I have given to him for servants, and with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. But by your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. Now, here again, Isaac speaks of all of Jacob's brothers, of which we only know of one, Esau. But this does lend credence to the idea that Isaac and Rebekah had other children that aren't specifically mentioned in God's word. That seems a little odd given the thoroughness of biblical genealogies that we've looked at so far, but it would explain why Isaac mentioned Jacob ruling over his brothers rather than a single brother. So he says that he would break, that Esau would break the yoke of Jacob's rule over him. So let's take a look at this Uzziah and Jeroboam II map. During the reigns of King David and King Solomon, Jacob's descendants, who were these 2 kings, did indeed rule over Esau's descendants. You remember when Esau sold his inheritance sold his birthright to Jacob for the red stew, that he had been renamed Edom, which means red. And here on this map, we see that the land of Edom, down here southeast of the Dead Sea, that land, those people, the Moabites and the Edomites, were indeed gave tribute, or they were ruled over by David's kingdom and Solomon's kingdom afterwards. But then after Solomon allowed Israel to fall into idolatry, God took away all but 2 of the tribes from Solomon and gave them to his servant. Well, this was after Solomon died. When he died, God divided the kingdom between Solomon's son Rehoboam, who ruled in the southern kingdom, which was called Judah, over 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. And then he gave the northern kingdom, the other 10 tribes, to Solomon's servant Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. And that northern kingdom from that point forward was known as the kingdom of Israel. And then the southern kingdom was known as the kingdom of Judah, and that's what's shown here on this map. If we look, see, here's the northern kingdom of Israel, which had its capital in the city of Samaria, and the southern kingdom of Judah, which had its capital in Jerusalem. But the Edomites, in that time, in the time of King Jehoram, who is also known as Joram, king, who was king of Judah, the Edomites rebelled against the rule of over Edom and Moab, and stopped paying tribute to the king of Judah. So that was the fulfillment of the prophecy that Isaac made here in his blessing of Esau, when he said, by your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother, but when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. So they did that under the rule of King Jehoram of Judah. You can read about that in 2 Kings 8 and in 2 Chronicles 21. You can find an excellent summary of these rebellions, the rebellions of these vassal nations to David and Solomon, at BibleMapper.com, and I'll put a link to that article in the notes. Next time, we're going to see that Esau was pretty upset at this deceit that Jacob had perpetrated on Isaac, and so he said that he was going to kill Jacob as soon as Isaac died. So Rebekah got wind of this, and so she convinced Isaac to send Jacob away back to her people up in Padan Aram to get a wife there. And as it turned out, he married married 2 wives and had 2 of their servants, their maidservants, as de facto wives, and altogether the 4 of them bore Jacob 12 sons and at least 1 daughter, and those 12 sons became the progenitors of what we would come to know as the nation of Israel. So we'll look at that next time.